Welcome to Reddit's for Sleep, your cozy corner for calming, emotional Reddit stories to help you relax and drift off. If this video brings you peace, take a second to gently tap the like button. It helps more sleepy souls find us. And if you enjoy these slow, soothing stories, subscribe so you can fall asleep with us every night. Now, settle in and let the first story take you away. Story 1. The Man Across the Hall. I live in a quiet apartment building just outside of Philadelphia, the kind of place where neighbors nod politely but keep to themselves. It's mostly working professionals, a few retirees, and the occasional family passing through during a transition in life. Nothing about it would catch your eye. Beige walls, average rent, decent laundry room. But it's quiet. And for the last 3 years, that's exactly what I needed. I moved in right after my divorce finalized. My ex-wife and I had no kids, no messy house to fight over, just the weight of 10 quiet years that slipped into something colder than love. I remember walking into apartment 306 with a single suitcase and a cardboard box of kitchen stuff. The place smelled like lemon disinfectant. It was silent. It felt like a retreat from the chaos of everything else. A few days after I moved in, I met the man across the hall. His name was Mr. Howard. That's how he introduced himself. Call me Mr. Howard, not Howard. He must have been in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. Tall, ramrod posture, always wore a button-up, even on weekends. He had this old-school presence about him, like a retired history professor or someone who used to run a newspaper. The type of guy who read physical copies of the Times and believed in decaf after 7 p.m. I'd hear him every morning like clockwork. His door would open at 6:15 a.m. sharp. I'd hear the soft squeak of his mail slot, then the metallic click of the kettle starting in his kitchen. No music, no TV, just him, living like a ghost from another era. He didn't seem to have visitors. No kids came by, no delivery drivers, just him and his quiet rituals. We exchanged a few polite nods over the months. Sometimes he'd say things like, "Cool breeze today, huh?" Or, "They need to salt those stairs better." Harmless small talk, but that was it. I never knew what he did for work, never saw inside his apartment, never even caught his full name. Just Mr. Howard. One November morning, something changed. I was heading out for work. It was cold, one of those early winter days where your breath fogs up instantly. I stepped out into the hallway and noticed his door slightly ajar. Unusual. Mr. Howard was meticulous about locking it. I knocked softly, then a little louder. "Mr. Howard." No answer. I pushed it open a little, unsure of what to expect. The apartment inside looked like a time capsule. Vintage furniture, stacks of newspapers on the coffee table, an old rotary phone on the wall. Everything smelled like dust and brewed tea, but no sign of him. I walked further in, cautiously. "Mr. Howard?" I called again. Then I heard a sound from the back, a weak cough, followed by the faint scraping of a chair. He was in the kitchen, sitting at the small table, looking pale and confused. His hand was trembling as he tried to reach for a teacup. I rushed over. "Are you all right, sir?" He blinked slowly, then gave me a tired nod. I think I must have sat down too fast," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I offered to call an ambulance. He refused. Said he just needed a moment. I didn't feel right leaving him alone, so I made him some toast and stayed for a bit. We talked more than we ever had before. He told me he used to be a librarian in New York, back when libraries were temples. He spoke about books the way some men talk about old jazz records, with reverence, with love. He had no children, no siblings. His wife had passed from cancer 12 years ago. "I suppose I just got used to the quiet," he said, staring out the window. That morning became a habit. A few times a week, I'd stop by before work, bring him coffee, maybe a pastry. He didn't ask for much, just company. And stories. He loves stories. I'd tell him about the guy in accounting who couldn't figure out how to use Slack, or the woman in HR who kept dating guys who sold knives. We'd laugh quietly. His laugh was this breathy, wheezing thing, like the last puff of air from a balloon. Over the next few months, I started noticing things. His keys were in the fridge once. He forgot where he left his mail. He called me Charles a few times, even though my name's Dan. He repeated himself more. The signs were there, slowly unraveling. I offered to help more run errands, pick up groceries. But Mr. Howard was proud. "I'm not dead yet," he'd say with a smile. I didn't push. Then came the night I found him on the floor. It was late, close to midnight. I heard a loud thud across the hall, followed by silence. Something in my gut told me to check. I found him lying next to the coffee table, eyes wide and scared. I called the ambulance. They took him gently, wrapped in a gray wool blanket. He didn't come back. A few weeks later, I got a small envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note on aged stationery. Dan. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the mornings. You reminded me what it felt like to be seen. Mr. H. That was it. I never found out who sent it. Maybe the hospital, maybe a nurse. Maybe he had it prepared before things got worse. But it hit me harder than I expected. Now, when I wake up and head to work, I still pause outside his old apartment. It's empty now, silent. But sometimes, I think I hear the soft scrape of a kettle starting, or the rustle of newspaper pages turning. And I remember that, for a while, just a little while, I helped someone feel human again. Story 2. My mother-in-law lived with us until I recorded everything. My wife and I live in a modest 2-bedroom home just outside of Portland, Oregon. It's not fancy, but it's ours. A little corner lot with overgrown hydrangeas and a creaky back porch where we drink coffee on Sundays. We're both in our late 30s. No kids yet, though we've talked about it more seriously since her promotion last fall. We live quietly, intentionally. The way you do after your 20s are behind you, and you've made peace with who you're becoming. 3 years ago, we made the decision to let her mother move in with us. She'd been struggling after her husband passed emotionally, financially. Her lease was up, her health was spotty, and she didn't really have anyone else. My wife, Jen, is an only child. So we sat down and talked through it. It was meant to be temporary, maybe 6 months. Tops. Help her back on her feet, let her get settled somewhere closer to town. We cleared out the second bedroom, moved her favorite rocking chair into the den, even gave up half our storage space. She moved in on a rainy Thursday with 2 suitcases and a sour attitude I brushed off as grief. That was my first mistake. To say my mother-in-law is difficult is like saying the Pacific Northwest gets a little rain. She's passive-aggressive in a way that feels engineered. Her words are always technically polite, but loaded with venom. Oh, you're wearing that to work? Or some people just weren't raised to use coasters, I suppose. She made little comments constantly about how I made my coffee, how I folded laundry, how I hovered too much when I cooked. She once stood over me while I loaded the dishwasher and sighed so loudly I had to ask if something was wrong. "I just think it's sad," she said, "that men don't learn the proper way to do things anymore." I bit my tongue for Jen. I kept biting it for 6 long months. Then, somehow, 6 months became a year. Every time we gently brought up the idea of her moving out, she found a new reason it wouldn't work. Her blood pressure, her finances, her chiropractor was nearby. "I'd just be a burden somewhere else," she'd say, as if we weren't drowning in the weight of her presence already. The worst part was how she played the victim expertly. In front of Jen, she was sweet, reserved, even complimentary toward me. But when we were alone, she'd snipe and criticize. Or, worse, give me the silent treatment like a child. I tried to talk to Jen about it. She believed me, sort of. But she also knew her mom had been through a lot, and that made it harder for her to confront it head on. I understood. But it didn't make it easier. One night, something snapped. It was a Tuesday. I came home from work, exhausted, walked in the door to find my mother-in-law sitting in my armchair, eating pistachios, and watching some low-budget crime show on full blast. There were pistachio shells all over the side table. My grandmother's crocheted blanket, the one I keep neatly folded on the back of the chair, was bunched up like a dog bed. I asked, as gently as I could, "Hey, would you mind using a bowl for the shells?" She didn't answer, just raised the remote and turned the volume up. Later that night, Jen told me her mom said I yelled at her, that I stormed in and accused her of being filthy. I was stunned. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't even moved toward her. But somehow, the version of the story Jen heard made me sound like a tyrant. I tried defending myself, but Jen looked tired, torn. I could see her trying to believe both versions of the story at once. That's when the idea hit me. Not out of spite, not to trap her, but to prove what was happening. I needed Jen to hear it for herself. So, the next morning, I set up a small audio recorder. I placed it discreetly on a shelf in the living room high up, hidden among books and dusty picture frames. Nothing illegal it was in my own home. Oregon law allows one-party consent recording. Over the next 2 weeks, I let it run while I was out. I'd go to work, hit record, and let the day unfold. The results were something else. On day 3, she called me a lazy excuse of a husband because I didn't fill the Brita filter all the way. On day 6, she mocked my laugh to someone over the phone. On day 10, she said she didn't trust men who cook, it's unnatural. But the worst was day 12. That was the day Jen got home early. I was still at work. Her mom greeted her sweetly, then sat her down and began weaving a web of lies so thick it stunned me. She claimed I made her feel unsafe, that I glared at her while she ate, that I muttered things under my breath, that I was becoming unpredictable. It was chilling, like watching someone plant poison slowly. That night, I played the recording for Jen, all of it. We sat on the couch with my phone between us, the air in the room turning heavier with each passing minute. Jen didn't speak until the end. Her eyes were glassy. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I didn't know. It wasn't anger I saw in her face. It was grief. Grief for the mother she thought she had, for the man she'd been doubting, for the weight we'd both been carrying without fully realizing how much it had bent our backs. The next day, we had the conversation. The final one. Jen told her mom it was time to go. She offered to help find a senior apartment complex nearby, even cover part of the rent for a few months. But her tone was firm, adult, decisive. Her mother didn't go quietly. There were tears, accusations, even one last jab at my obsessive need to control things. But she left, and the house felt light. The silence wasn't loaded anymore. The air felt breathable. For the first time in over a year, Jen and I danced in the kitchen on a Friday night. We laughed. We slept without tension curled between us. Sometimes, I still walk by that empty second bedroom and feel the echo of what used to be there. Not just her, but the part of us that got lost trying to hold everything together. But we're rebuilding. And I learned something important. That calm doesn't always mean peace, and quiet doesn't always mean harmony. Sometimes, peace comes only when you stop biting your tongue and start speaking your truth, even if you need to record it first. Story 3. I found my brother's old phone in a box of junk, and it changed everything. I hadn't seen my brother in 6 years. We didn't fight. There wasn't some explosive falling out, just a slow fade, the kind of drifting that happens when two people grow in different directions and neither one knows how to say, "I miss you." His name was Marcus, older than me by 2 years. When we were kids, we were close in that unspoken way brothers sometimes are fighting over PlayStation controllers one minute and defending each other from school bullies the next. We shared a bunk bed for a while growing up in Tucson, Arizona, where the summers felt like walking through a hairdryer and the cicadas buzzed louder than the TV. I went the college route, got a job in corporate logistics, moved to Denver with a girlfriend who became a fiancée, then a wife, then an ex-wife. Marcus didn't care much for school. He worked odd jobs, bartending, construction, landscaping, always had some new project going, but nothing that stuck. He stayed in Arizona. I didn't. Then, one summer, I got the call. It was our mom. Her voice was tight, like it was holding something in. "Marcus passed away," she said. "Car accident. On a county road, just outside Mesa. No alcohol, no one else involved. Just a bad curve, a slick road, and an old truck that didn't respond fast enough." I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the carpet like I was waiting for it to change shape. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like anything. I flew back for the funeral, saw people I hadn't seen in years, shook hands, nodded, hugged. I gave a short eulogy I barely remember writing. My mom held herself together, like glass shimmering, fragile, pretending not to crack. After the service, I stayed an extra week to help her go through Marcus's things. He didn't leave much behind, a couple of boxes. A guitar with a broken string, a pile of receipts, a worn leather wallet with $9 inside, and a phone. Not a new one. An old Samsung model with a cracked screen and a faded case that once was red, but had turned a washed-out pink with time and use. "Does it still turn on?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "I don't think so. Battery's probably dead." We tossed it into one of the junk boxes, the kind you always mean to throw out but never do. Months passed. I went back to Denver, tried to slip into my routines, morning gym, work emails, meal prep, Netflix, but something kept tugging at me. Not just the grief, though, that was real, but a strange guilt. Like I'd missed something, like there were parts of Marcus I never really knew. In December, I flew home for the holidays. Mom had finally started clearing out the garage. That's when I found the box, the one with the phone still inside. Wrapped in a tangle of old charging cables in a scratched CD labeled Summer Mix 2009. Something made me take the phone with me. Back in Denver, I ordered a charger online, a rare one I had to hunt down through a third-party seller. When it arrived, I plugged it in on a cold Thursday night, not really expecting much. But to my surprise, after a few minutes, the screen lit up, battery 4%. It was slow, glitchy, but alive. I entered a few guesses at the pin before trying Marcus's old locker combo from high school. 1987. It worked. The phone was like a time capsule. Old photos, mostly blurry concerts, bonfires, a dog I didn't recognize. There were text threads, many unanswered, notes to himself, reminders to call people, grocery lists, half-written poems that made no sense. But then I found a folder labeled Voice Memos. There were dozens of them. Some were under 10 seconds. Others stretched to a few minutes. They were dated over the span of a year and a half, right up until a month before he died. I listened to the first one. "January 12th, he said, his voice tired. "Didn't sleep again last night. I keep dreaming about that gas station off Route 8, the one where Dad used to stop for sodas. I miss him. Wish I could say that out loud without feeling like a loser." My chest tightened. I played the next one, Then the next. He talked about life in fragments, missing dad, feeling stuck, being proud of mom for going to her book club, even though she always says people make her nervous. He talked about a girl he loved who didn't love him back, about wanting to quit his job, about trying to write a song that never came together, and he talked about me. April 3rd, he said in one of them, voice softer than the others. Saw Alex posted on Instagram, he got promoted again. Proud of him. Wish I knew how to tell him that. Wish I knew how to ask if he ever misses being close. Another memo, dated a few weeks later. Still haven't texted him. What would I even say? Hey, remember when we buried that lizard in the backyard and made a grave out of popsicle sticks? Probably thinks I'm an idiot, but I think about that stuff more than I should. I sat there in my dark apartment for hours listening to his voice, a version of Marcus I never got to meet. Not the wild card, not the drifter, but a man full of doubt, heart, humor, a man who carried love in his pockets and never quite knew where to put it. That night, I cried for the first time since the funeral. Not just because he was gone, but because I'd missed the chance to reach for him before the road did. I copied the voice memos to my laptop, every single one. I called my mom the next day and told her about them. She asked if she could hear just one. I played her the one where he joked about how she talked to squirrels like they were roommates. She laughed. Then she cried. We both did. Now, once a week, I play one of the recordings while I sip coffee on the porch. I let Marcus's voice fill the space. Sometimes I talk back, tell him about my new job, the girl I've been seeing, the car trouble I've been avoiding. It's not closure, not really, but it's something. A thread back to the brother I lost, and maybe the brother I never fully had. And I guess the reason I'm writing this is because if you got someone you've drifted from, maybe reach out, not with a big speech. Maybe just a photo, a meme. Hey, remember this? Because we all think there's more time. Until there isn't. Story 4, my boss thought I was too quiet. So I showed him why. I've always been quiet. Not shy, just observant. I'm the kind of person who listens more than they speak, especially in loud environments like open offices. I've been that way since I was a kid. While others filled the air, I watched. While people cracked jokes or shared hot takes, I was the one organizing my thoughts in the background. It wasn't anxiety. I don't hate people. I just don't see the need to fill silences that aren't asking to be filled. This personality quirk has followed me into adulthood. I work in HR compliance for a mid-sized company in Charlotte. We do supply chain logistics. A boring sounding field that's actually filled with drama, if you listen closely enough. Most of my job is policy related, keeping records, documenting employee disputes, conducting training sessions, nothing glamorous. But I'm good at it, thorough, efficient, quiet. About a year ago, we got a new manager in our department, Jason. Jason came from a loud, fast-talking sales culture, the kind of guy who high-fives strangers and uses phrases like crushing it, unironically. Think Patagonia vest, over button down, always sipping from a metal water bottle. Always trying to start impromptu team-building chats in the break room. At first, he seemed harmless, but it didn't take long to realize that he had a problem with me, not my work, my personality. You're too quiet, he told me one afternoon. It's not good for team morale. I blinked. I meet all my deadlines. I communicate everything I need to. He shrugged. Yeah, but it's about presence, you know. People need to feel your energy in the room. I almost laughed. My energy is in the spreadsheets, Jason. Over the next few weeks, it escalated. He started calling me out in meetings. Let's hear from the silent one today. He'd joke, grinning like it was charming. Or, hey, you awake over there? Don't let us extroverts scare you. I smiled politely, tried to brush it off, but it wore me down. Then came the feedback meeting. Jason scheduled it on a Friday at 4 p.m. Classic passive-aggressive move, sat me down with a performance review that, on paper, looked fine. But he emphasized his concerns about cultural fit. You're smart, he said, but people find you closed off. It's creating friction. How so? I asked. He hesitated. Well, you don't really participate. People don't feel like they know you. I keep conversations professional. Isn't that the expectation? Sure, he said, smiling thinly. But culture matters. Something in me snapped. Not with anger, but with resolve. Okay, I said. You want presents? You'll get it. Starting the next Monday, I changed everything. In the morning meeting, I cracked jokes, loudly, obnoxiously. I spoke up first, commented on everything, gave detailed thoughts on every agenda item, even ones that didn't involve me. Jason beamed. Then I kept going. I started replying all to internal emails, even the ones meant for 1 or 2 people with overly formal messages. Thanks for looping me in. Per my last email, let's align on deliverables. During virtual calls, I gave long-winded insights no one asked for. Use corporate buzzwords like synergy, bandwidth, and value proposition as often as possible. I started scheduling optional brainstorming sessions on Fridays just to build rapport. At lunch, I invited myself into other people's conversations. What's up, gang? I'd say with a huge grin, even though I knew they were mid-discussion about something personal. I'd insert myself, offer advice no one wanted, then bring up policy changes no one cared about. I did this for 2 weeks. By the end of week 1, people were avoiding me. By the end of week 2, one of my coworkers messaged me privately. Hey, is everything okay with you? This isn't really like you. I replied, just being a better cultural fit. Then came the team meeting where Jason finally cracked. We were going over the quarterly training schedule. I launched into a 7-minute monologue about employee engagement, quoting a report I printed from Harvard Business Review. Jason cut me off. Okay, that's helpful, he said. Maybe let's move on. I nodded. Of course, just making sure my energy is felt in the room. He blinked. Sorry. I smiled. You said my quietness was affecting morale, so I've been showing up more, being present, being loud. The room went silent. One of the interns smothered a laugh. Jason coughed. Right, well, let's stay balanced. Absolutely, I said. The next day, he scheduled another one-on-one. Look, he said, I appreciate your effort, but I think we both know the recent change in your behavior isn't really you. I raised an eyebrow. You asked me to be louder, more involved. Yes, but you said people didn't feel my presence. I'm making sure they do. He looked frustrated. It's not about fake enthusiasm, but I thought presence mattered more than results. He stared at me for a long second, then rubbed his temples. I just want you to be yourself, he muttered. I smiled. Great, that's all I ever wanted. Since then, he's backed off. Meetings are quieter. My name doesn't come up as often. I still participate, but on my terms, respectfully. With intention. Like I always have. The truth is, some of us work better in stillness. We thrive in the background, not because we lack ideas, but because we're listening, processing, building something worth saying. Not everyone needs to be the loudest voice in the room. Some of us get things done by watching the chaos and quietly fixing what others miss. Story 5. The woman who lived in apartment 3B. I moved into my apartment building in Milwaukee when I was 33, newly single, trying to start over after a long-term relationship that fizzled into nothing, The place wasn't much, a brick 3-story walk-up built in the 60s, with carpets that held too many years of footsteps and a boiler that made strange noises when it was cold. But it was mine. I moved into 3A, a one-bedroom unit at the end of the hall. Across from me was 3B, the only other apartment on that floor. It had a green wreath on the door year-round. I never saw anyone go in or out during move-in weekend, but I assumed someone lived there. I kept mostly to myself. Woke up early for work, came home late, ate leftovers, watched reruns. Life was quiet. Not sad, exactly, but still, like a song playing at low volume. About a week after I moved in, I heard music through the wall. Soft jazz. The kind you might imagine in a movie scene with rain and old bookstores. It played for about an hour, then stopped. The next night, it came back. Same time, same gentle hum of horns and piano. The night after that, I heard humming. Not loud. Just a woman's voice, humming along, slightly off-key but peaceful. She kept time with the rhythm. It wasn't annoying. If anything, it made the place feel more alive, like someone else nearby was also trying to make peace with their own silence. I didn't hear much else from her for weeks, just occasional music, and one time the soft thud of something falling followed by a muffled, "Oh, shoot." Then, one Saturday morning, we crossed paths. I was taking out the trash when the door to 3B opened. She stepped out, a woman in her late 60s, maybe early 70s. Tall, thin, with soft white hair pulled back into a loose braid. She wore a navy cardigan and held a watering can shaped like a cat. "Oh, hello," she said, smiling warmly. "You must be the new neighbor." I nodded. "Yeah, just moved in a few weeks ago. I'm Alex." "I'm Lorraine," she said, extending a hand. "I hope I haven't been too noisy." "I do love my records." "Not at all," I said. "Honestly, it's kind of nice." She laughed. "Well, that's good to hear. Most people think jazz is sad, but I think it's the sound of trying. You know?" I didn't know, but I smiled like I did. We chatted for a bit. She asked about my work. I asked about her cat-shaped watering can. She said she'd lived in 3B for over 30 years, had taught elementary school before retiring, and now mostly kept to herself, except for her plants and her music. Over the next few months, we got into a rhythm. I'd see her in the hallway. Sometimes we'd chat briefly. Sometimes she'd leave a small tin of cookies by my door with a note that just said, "Try these." One time, I left her a book I thought she'd like, and a few days later she returned it with a sticky note that said, "This one made me cry in a good way." We never hung out properly, never had tea together, or swapped stories for hours. But her presence became part of my life's quiet background, like the jazz, like the humming. Then, one day, it stopped. No music, no humming, no "try these cookies." A week passed, then 2. I left a small note by her door. "Hey, Lorraine, hope you're doing all right. Let me know if you need anything. A." No reply. After 3 weeks, I started to worry. I knocked a few times. No answer. I asked the building manager if she was okay. He hesitated, then told me gently that Lorraine had passed away. Heart failure, peacefully. In her sleep. I stood there in the hallway, holding the note I'd written, not quite sure what to do with it now. Her family came by the next week to start cleaning out the apartment. I stayed out of the way, but one afternoon, her niece knocked on my door. "You're the neighbor?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Alex." "I'm Rachel," she said. "My aunt mentioned you in her journal, said you were kind." That caught me off guard. She kept a journal? She wrote every day, Rachel said, smiling faintly. She always said it helped her stay connected to the world. She held out a small package. "She wanted you to have this. Left a note with your name." Inside was a record Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. There was a yellow sticky note on the sleeve. "Dear Alex, for the quiet days. Thanks for noticing the music. Al. I stood there in my doorway for a long time after she left, holding that record like it was more than vinyl and cardboard. That night, I played it. The soft horns, the slow piano, the gentle rhythm that asked for nothing but attention. It filled the room like her spirit had slipped in through the walls. I sat on the floor and let it wash over me. I still play it sometimes, when the apartment feels too still. I imagine Lorraine sitting on the other side of the wall, humming softly, her cat watering can on the windowsill beside a blooming violet. We weren't close, in the traditional sense, but she made that lonely stretch of my life feel less empty. Just by being there, just by noticing me. And in return, I noticed her. Sometimes that's all connection is. Two people on opposite sides of a wall listening. Story 6. He left me a list before he died. My husband died on a Tuesday morning in April. His name was Michael. He was 41. The official cause was a sudden cardiac arrest. No warning, no lead up, no time to prepare. He collapsed in our kitchen while reaching for the coffee filter. I was still upstairs getting dressed. By the time I heard the crash and ran down, he was gone. Just like that. We'd been married for 9 years, no kids, a small, quiet life in a quiet corner of Maine, with routines like Sunday morning pancakes and long drives with no destination. Michael liked puzzles, old jazz records, and overcooking eggs no matter how many times I teased him about it. After the funeral, everything slowed down. People visited. Then they stopped. Meals were delivered. Then they weren't. The house got quieter, day by day, like grief was peeling back the layers of noise and leaving me with nothing but air. It took me almost a month to go into his office. I kept the door shut for weeks. Something about it felt sacred and wrong to disturb. But eventually, I opened it because the internet bill was overdue and I needed his password. Typical. His office was neat, a little too neat, like he'd tidied up the day before, which, knowing Michael, he probably had. He hated clutter. His notebooks were stacked by date, pens in a mug that said, "World's okayest husband." A little origami crane I'd made him years ago still sat on the top shelf. I opened his laptop. It booted up with no password. Classic Michael trusting to a fault. The home screen had a single folder on the desktop labeled simply, "For Anna." I stared at it for a long time. Then I double-clicked. Inside were several documents. One was titled, "When You Need This." I opened it, hands trembling. It started with, "If you're reading this, something's happened. I'm sorry, my love. I'm so sorry. Please don't stop reading." He'd written it 6 months before he died. I checked the file's properties. October 12th. He must have known something. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just preparing like he always did. Even when I teased him about his emergency kits and plan Bs. Maybe he wrote it on a day when the weight of love made him imagine a world where he couldn't protect me anymore. The document continued. "I've made you a list, not instructions, not things you have to do, just ideas. In case the world gets too quiet and you forget how to move forward. You always said you liked lists. So, here's mine, for you. 1. Eat warm bread with butter, at least once a week. Life is too short for low-carb sadness. 2. Leave the porch light on, even when you're alone. Not because someone's coming, but because it feels less lonely that way. 3. Play the songs we dance to, even if it makes you cry, especially if it does. 4. Travel, even just to the next town over. Change your view. Breathe different air. Let the world remind you it's still turning. 5. Find someone to tell your stories to. Not because I'm gone, but because they're still yours. 6. Don't be afraid to love again. I mean it. I'll be furious if you don't. You're too good at loving to waste it. 7. Forgive yourself for the bad days. They're part of the whole picture. Let them in. Let them pass. 8. Keep a pin in your bag. You always say your best idea is hitting grocery store lines. 9. Go easy on coffee after 4 p.m. This is more for your sleep than your heart, though maybe now. Both. 10. Talk to me if you need to. Out loud. In the car. In the kitchen. I'll listen, even if it's only the echo. I sobbed for hours. Not the loud, gasping kind. Just a quiet collapse into my own hands. The way you do when the love is still there, but the person isn't. Over the next few weeks, I read that letter. Every day, I printed the list and stuck it to the fridge. At first, I followed it like a recipe. Then, slowly, like a prayer. I started walking to the bakery 3 blocks away and buying fresh sourdough. I left the porch light on every night. I visited a nearby town just to sit in a new park and let the wind touch my face. I even started journaling again, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote letters to him, silly ones, serious ones. I wrote about the neighbor's noisy dog, about the cardinal that visited our fence post every morning, about how much I missed his terrible scrambled eggs. And slowly, something shifted. Grief didn't disappear, but it softened. Became less of a blade, more of a shadow, something I could carry. One night, I played our old playlist. I danced barefoot in the living room, holding the air where he used to be. I didn't cry that time. I smiled. I don't know why Michael wrote that list. I don't know what moved him to open that document and type out those 10 lines of gentle instruction. But I do know this. Love leaves things behind. Not just memories or photos, but footprints, clues, lists, the shape of a life that says, you're still here. So live like it. Story 7. My father's watch wasn't broken. I was. My father passed away 9 years ago. Lung cancer. He never smoked a day in his life. That part still baffles me, the randomness of it all. The man never even touched alcohol. He jogged. He volunteered at the library. He ate yogurt with chia seeds before it was trendy. He loved his quiet routines, the crossword in ink, his garden gloves on the hook by the door, the watch on his wrist, always ticking. Always ticking. That's what I remember most vividly, the watch. It wasn't flashy, just a classic Seiko, leather band worn soft from decades of wear. He never took it off, not even in the shower. He said a man should always know the time, and never rely on something that needs charging. That watch outlived most of his friendships, 2 of his dogs, and nearly outlived me. When he passed, my mother gave it to me in a small velvet pouch. He would have wanted you to have it, she said, pressing it into my palm. I thanked her, put it in a drawer, didn't touch it again for years. At the time, I was in a bad place, drifting between jobs. A breakup that split me like an axe. I had pushed everyone away, including her, especially her. I couldn't handle grief on top of guilt. And so, the watch sat quiet, still, while I tried to outrun everything it symbolized. It wasn't until this past winter, during a slow, gray Sunday, that I stumbled on it again. I was reorganizing my sock drawer, of all things, a task that felt absurdly important in that moment. I needed order, or the illusion of it. There it was. The leather had dried slightly. The face was smudged, dusty. The hands were frozen at 2:17. I stared at it for a long time, then wound it absent-mindedly, expecting nothing. But something clicked. A soft tick, then another. And then, steady as ever, time began to move again. It caught me off guard, the way something that had been dormant for so long could come back to life with the smallest effort. I slipped it on my wrist. The leather felt stiff, foreign, but somehow grounding, like I'd been handed a weight I was always meant to carry. For the next few days, I wore it everywhere. Not for fashion, not for nostalgia, but because, for the first time in years, I needed something that could remind me that moments still mattered. One afternoon, I called my mom. We hadn't spoken in too long. I gave the usual excuses. Work, fatigue, the blur of days. She didn't scold me, just said, "I'm glad you called." We talked about Dad. She told me how, before he passed, he'd written notes for both of us, left them in labeled envelopes tucked into his closet drawer. "You didn't think to tell me this 9 years ago?" I joked. "I thought you'd find it when you were ready." I flew home the following weekend. Same house, same soft humming from the fridge, same framed photo of me at graduation, next to a much younger man who hadn't started coughing yet. She gave me the envelope over tea. On the front, "To my son, whenever he's ready." Inside, a single page. "Hey, kid. If you're reading this, it means you came back to us. Or at least, you're trying. I know life gets heavy. I know you carry more than you let on. I just hope you remember you're not alone, not ever. And that every man loses the thread sometimes. What matters is that you pick it back up. Take your time. Make mistakes. Forgive more. Especially yourself. And wind the damn watch. It still works, I promise. Love. Dad." I cried in the backyard, on the old deck where he used to barbecue chicken every summer, where he taught me how to cut wood with purpose, not panic, where he used to say things like, "You don't have to say much to say something." I sat there for a long while, the watch ticking softly on my wrist. That night, I dreamt of him. We were in the garage. He was organizing tools, everything in its place, as usual. He looked up, smiled, and said, "You found it." I didn't ask what he meant. Some things don't need explanation. Since then, I've kept the watch on. Not every day. I take it off to shower, to sleep, but when I wear it, it's like carrying part of him with me, not just the memory, but the rhythm. The reminder that time doesn't stop just because we do, that there's always movement underneath the stillness. I'm slowly rebuilding relationships. I reached out to friends I ghosted. I started therapy. I even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, just possibilities. I spend more time outside now. I've started gardening. Never thought I would, but it turns out soil has a way of pulling you into the present. The watch doesn't fix everything, but it grounds me. One soft tick at a time. Sometimes, late at night, I lie in bed and hold my wrist near my ear just to hear it, just to remind myself that things keep going, even when they feel broken. Turns out, the watch was never broken. I was. But I'm getting there. Story 8. The man at table 4 never said a word. I used to wait tables at a small diner off Route 61 in Pennsylvania. It wasn't much. Just a squat white building with flickering neon and a jukebox that only worked when you hit it. We had booths lined with cracked red vinyl and coffee that tasted slightly burnt, no matter how fresh the pot. But the regulars liked it. Said it had character. Said it reminded them of someplace better, or someone they missed. I worked the morning shift. 5:45 a.m. clocking. Apron tight. Smile rehearsed in the bathroom mirror before stepping out. Most of our customers came in for the same orders every day. You get to know them fast. The guy who wants his eggs dead twice. The woman who brings her own almond milk in a mason jar. The trucker who plays Sudoku and tips exactly $2.17 every time. But there was one man who never said a word. He started coming in mid-December, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 60s, maybe older. Always wore the same faded flannel, heavy boots, and a worn baseball cap that said, Frank's Auto Repair. He sat in the same booth every time table 4, near the window that fogged up when it snowed. I remember the first morning he walked in. Didn't make eye contact. Didn't speak. Just slid into the booth and tapped the table once with 2 fingers like a signal. I walked over and greeted him the way I did everyone else. Good morning, sir. What can I get you? He pointed to the specials board. Number 2? I guessed. He nodded once. That's how it started. Every morning after that, he came in at exactly 6:10, sat at table 4, ordered the number 2, 2 scrambled eggs, bacon, wheat toast, black coffee. No cream, no sugar. Never looked at the menu, never said a word. I started calling him Mr. Franks in my head. After the second week, I stopped asking what he wanted. I'd just brought it. He'd nod once in thanks, eat slowly, cleanly, like a man trained by silence. He never left a mess, never stayed long. Always left a $10 bill on the table and walked out exactly 40 minutes after arriving. It became a kind of comfort, like clockwork. I tried to make small talk a few times, nothing pushy, just cold out there today. Or, hope the roads weren't bad. He never answered, just nodded politely, sometimes blinked slowly, like the words reached him but got lost in translation. The other servers found it odd. One of the younger girls said maybe he was mute, or had social anxiety. Another said maybe he was a ghost, which made us all laugh a little harder than we should have. But I kept serving him, every day, without fail. Then, one morning in early March, he didn't show up. 6:10 came and went. Table 4 stayed empty. It rattled me more than it should have. I kept glancing toward the door, listening for those heavy boots, waiting for the creak of the vinyl seat. But nothing. The next day, still no sign. And the next. By the 5th day, I felt it deep in my chest, like something small but real had been removed from my life, and I didn't know how to get it back. I asked around. No one knew who he was. Not the locals. Not the auto shop down the road. There was no Frank anymore, apparently. Place had closed 2 years ago. I started checking the obituaries, scanning for photos, for any sign. Nothing. Weeks passed. March melted into April. I stopped expecting him. Then, one quiet Wednesday, I came into the diner for my shift. Found an envelope on table 4. No name, just the table number written neatly in blue ink. I looked around. No one had seen who left it. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper, the kind you'd tear from a spiral-bound notebook. To the woman at table 4. I never spoke because I didn't trust my voice. It's been too long since I've used it for anything soft. But I wanted you to know, you made my days feel human again. My wife used to sit across from me at this booth. We came every Sunday for years. After she passed, I stopped coming. Couldn't stand the silence across the table. Then one day, I tried again, just once, to see if I could sit here without falling apart. You didn't push. You just brought the food and smiled like it wasn't strange. That meant more than you'll ever know. I'm moving to Ohio to be closer to my son. I don't know if I'll come back this way. But thank you. You made the silence bearable. M. I sat in that booth for a long time, holding that letter like it might vanish if I let go. I told the cook what happened. He didn't say anything, just handed me a slice of pie on the house and walked away. To this day, I keep the letter in my wallet. Sometimes I reread it when I'm feeling disconnected from work, from people, from the point of it all. It reminds me that not every kindness looks like conversation. Not every connection needs words. Sometimes, just showing up matters more than we realize. Especially for someone who's relearning how to sit with the silence. Story 9. The Neighborhood Dog Walkers Secret Club. When I moved into the neighborhood, I wasn't planning on making friends. I was 38, fresh out of a draining divorce, and emotionally fried. The house was a fixer-upper in suburban Connecticut's slightly crooked porch, overgrown backyard, faded shutters. But it had character, the kind of place you could hear creak in the winter and still call home. It was just me and my dog, Penny, a 6-year-old golden retriever with more patience than I deserved. She'd been with me through the worst of the marriage and all of its unraveling. When everything else felt uncertain, she was the one thing I never had to question. I kept to myself those first few weeks. Wake up, walk Penny, coffee, work from home, another walk, dinner, maybe some TV, and bed. It was a routine, simple, repetitive, safe. But I started to notice something on those walks. Every morning around 7:30, without fail, the neighborhood came alive, not with cars or leaf blowers or kids rushing for school, but with dogs, dozens of them. There was an older man in a navy beanie with a tiny white terrier who barked at everything, a middle-aged woman with 2 sleek greyhounds who wore matching sweaters, a guy who looked like a former college linebacker, walking a basset hound so slowly you'd think they were sightseeing. It wasn't just that there were a lot of dogs, it was the rhythm of it. Every day, like clockwork, this rotating parade of leash holders and furry companions circled the same sidewalks, waved to each other, smiled, nodded. But no one talked to me. I figured I hadn't earned the invisible membership yet. Penny and I kept our distance. Until one Tuesday morning, when the basset hound guy waved and said, "New here?" I nodded. "Moved in about a month ago?" "Welcome to the circuit." He grinned. "The circuit?" He motioned around us. "Dog walkers loop. We all kind of walk in this big, lazy square around the neighborhood. Keeps the dogs social. Keeps us sane." I laughed. I thought it was a coincidence. "Nope," he said. "It's a thing. No name, no rules, just this." He pointed to the little cluster of walkers gathering at the corner. "Come say hi. Everyone's friendly." I hesitated, but Penny, ever the extrovert, tugged the leash with enthusiasm. And just like that, I joined the loop. The others introduced themselves easily, casually, like they'd been expecting me all along. There was Doris, who had a 17-year-old Chihuahua named Bean, Terrence, a retired postal worker with an energetic lab mix named Mango, Priya, a freelance graphic designer who walked her elderly neighbor's dachshund every morning before work, and of course the Basset Hound's owner, Evan, who turned out to be a high school biology teacher with a deadpan sense of humor and a collection of mismatched socks. No one asked about my divorce. No one probed into why I looked tired or why I sometimes wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. Instead, we talked about things like dog food recalls, weird dreams, neighborhood squirrels, the weather, which house had the best Halloween decorations, and whether Penny looked more like a pancake or a loaf of bread when she laid on her side. It was small talk, but comforting. The kind that fills the air without needing to be deep. The kind that says, "You're welcome here," even if you don't know what to say yet. Every morning, the loop became part of my life. We'd walk together for 20, 30 minutes, sometimes longer. If someone brought coffee in a thermos, our dogs would sniff, tug, sit, bark, ignore each other, or roll in something questionable. No one judged anyone's pace. One day in November, it started snowing lightly during the walk. We all stopped at the corner near Terrence's house and just stood there, watching the flakes fall through the amber leaves. "It's always quiet before winter really starts," Doris said, her breath a soft cloud. "This is the part I like." Everyone nodded. No one rushed home. After a few months, I realized something. This wasn't just dog walking. It was a kind of support group, a soft net, a slow-moving, leash-holding collective of people who didn't want to admit how much they needed each other, but showed up every day anyway. One morning, Evan didn't show up. We didn't think much of it. People miss walks sometimes. But then a second day, a third. On day 4, Doris texted him. Yes, we'd all exchanged numbers by then. No response. Priya went to knock on his door. It turned out he'd had emergency gallbladder surgery. He was okay recovering, but home, alone, groggy, and hadn't told anyone because he didn't want to be a bother. The next morning we delivered groceries, soup, cookies, and a gift bag of dog treats. Someone even bought new socks. Evan cried. Not loudly, just a soft leak at the corner of his eyes as he hugged the bag to his chest. By spring, Penny had more friends than I did. She and Mango had a daily wrestling match on the grass near the school. Bean, though mostly blind, recognized her by sniff alone and followed her around like a tiny satellite. People knew her name before they remembered mine. But I didn't mind. Something about being known through your dog felt safer. Less exposed. That summer, Terrence hosted a barbecue in his backyard. No fancy invites, just a "hey, come by if you want" text. Every single person from the loop showed up. The dogs ran around like kids at a carnival. We ate paper plates of burgers and drank iced tea and laughed at nothing for hours. Someone brought up how in the past they used to dread mornings. Now they looked forward to them. I realized I felt the same. Not long ago, I was walking Penny alone, later than usual. A woman was walking her own pup and stopped near me. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you part of that morning dog crew?" I smiled. "Yeah, you thinking of joining?" She looked nervous. "We're new in town. I wasn't sure if you had to be invited." I shook my head. "You just show up." And something about that felt deeply important. You just show up. There's no password, no grand entry, no approval needed, just a willingness to walk at your own pace, with your own story beside people who are doing the same. It's been over a year now. I'm still in that little fixer-upper. The porch is sturdier, the backyard is trimmed. I've repainted the shutters a warm green. Evan helped. He says the house looks less like it needs therapy. I still walk Penny every morning. Still loop that same lazy square. Still show up. And every now and then, someone new appears on the sidewalk, leash in hand, uncertainty in their eyes. And just like they did for me, I smile and say, "Come on, walk with us." Story 10. The grocery store that saved my life. There's a grocery store near the edge of my neighborhood in Oregon. Nothing special, just one of those local, family-owned stores with flickering aisle lights, mismatched carts, and a bakery section that smells like cinnamon, even when there are no pastries left. It's not where I used to shop. Back when things were stable, I bought my groceries from the big chain down the highway, online orders, curbside pickup, everything fast and impersonal. I didn't think much about it, just another errand, another line item on a to-do list. But then, life happened. Layoff. Breakup. Apartment lease ending. Savings thinning out faster than I could think straight. I was 43, back living in the house I grew up in. Alone. Most of my days were spent refreshing job boards, sending off resumes like messages in bottles, hoping something would float back. Money got tight. That's how I found myself inside that little store one afternoon in February, standing under dim lighting with a calculator in one hand and a dented can of beans in the other. The woman at the checkout noticed me hesitating. "You all right, hun?" she asked. I looked up. She was probably in her 60s, hair in a braid down her back, glasses on a beaded chain. Her name tag said Sandy. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just doing some math." She gave a little nod. Beans are 2 for $1.79 right now. You might want to grab another. I thanked her and did just that. But what stuck with me wasn't the discount, it was how she said it. Gentle. Like it wasn't strange to see a grown adult budgeting canned goods in real time. After that, I started going there more often. Not because the prices were better. They weren't always. Not because it was closer. It wasn't. But because when I walked through those doors, I wasn't invisible. The man who stocked the produce aisle, Reggie, started calling me Mr. Apples, because I always picked out exactly 4 Honeycrisps. The cashier with the nose ring, Marla, once gave me a free chocolate bar after I helped her stack baskets. Even the store manager, Bill, would give me a nod every time he saw me, like we were old teammates or something. It didn't take much. How's your day going? Hey, careful. That freezer sticks sometimes. Hey, we got fresh rolls in if you're hungry. But it was everything. When the rest of my life felt like cardboard walls and rejection emails, those tiny human moments added up. I started going just to walk the aisles, even when I didn't need anything. Some days, I'd linger by the coffee shelf, just to breathe it in. Other times, I'd read the labels on hot sauce bottles like they were novels. No one rushed me. No one judged me. They just let me be. One rainy Thursday, I was standing in the frozen section, debating between budget pizza or budget burritos, when Sandy approached. "You okay today?" she asked. I must have looked worse than I realized. I nodded too quickly. Just tired. She looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her apron and pulled out a small envelope. "Someone left this in the tip jar for whoever needs it most. We usually pass it along when we can tell someone could use a little kindness." She held it out. I hesitated. "It's okay," she said. "It's not charity. Just neighbors." Inside was a $20 bill, folded neatly. No note, no conditions. I bought both the pizza and the burritos, and a loaf of that cinnamon bread from the bakery. That night, I cried for the first time in months, not out of hopelessness, but from something gentler, a kind of softness I'd forgotten existed. A few weeks later, I got a job offer. Small company, remote role, modest pay. But enough to stand again. The first thing I did was go back to that store and fill 2 paper bags with groceries. At the counter, Sandy looked up and smiled. "Stocking up, I see." I smiled back. "Yeah, things are looking up." She scanned the items, paused at the cinnamon bread. "And this?" I slid the envelope across the counter, the same kind they'd given me, now holding 2 $20 bills. For whoever needs it next. She didn't say anything at first. Just nodded, quietly, respectfully, like we were part of some quiet club. The kind held together by small acts, passed silently between strangers. I still shop there. Even now, with things more stable, I skip the big box stores and head straight for the crooked shelves and friendly faces. I wave at Reggie, ask Marla how her classes are going. Bring Sandy a cup of chai when I know she's working mornings. I know the world is bigger than this store. I know life can turn upside down again in a second. But I also know something else now. There are places in this world and people who catch you when you fall without making it feel like falling. Sometimes they come disguised as a bagger with a joke, a cashier with a soft smile, a dented can of beans, 2 for $1.79. Sometimes the thing that saves you doesn't look like rescue. It looks like kindness in a checkout line. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with Reddits for sleep. If your eyes are still open, remember to subscribe so you never miss another peaceful night. Tap the like button if you felt calm or connected to any of the stories. And if one of them really spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Sleep well. We'll be right here whenever you need us. A dented can of beans, 2 for $1.79. Sometimes the thing that saves you doesn't look like rescue. It looks like kindness in a checkout line. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with Reddits for sleep. If your eyes are still open, remember to subscribe so you never miss another peaceful night. Tap the like button if you felt calm or connected to any of the stories. And if one of them really spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Sleep well. We'll be right here whenever you need us.